You are standing in a stadium, screaming with 60,000 strangers, and for a moment, you don't feel like yourself. Your voice is louder than it's ever been at home. Your arms are raised. You are chanting words you would never say alone on the street. Something has taken over. Most people call it excitement or energy or getting caught up in the moment. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain isn't just excited, it's running a different set of rules. The person screaming in that crowd is not fully you. And the switch that flips isn't emotional. It's structural, ancient, and shockingly easy to trigger. Here's where it starts. In 1895, a French social thinker named Gustave Le Bon published a book called The Crowd, and it terrified an entire century of politicians. Le Bon had watched revolutions tear through Paris. He'd seen ordinary bakers and shopkeepers turn into mobs capable of violence they'd never commit on their own. He proposed something radical for his time. He said that when people gather in large groups, they don't just act together. They start to think together, as if merging into a single, cruder mind. He called it the group mind. Individual judgment fades. A kind of contagious impulse spreads instead, faster than reason can catch it. Le Bon didn't have brain scanners. He didn't have controlled experiments. But nearly a century later, psychologists would prove he was on to something real, even if his explanation was wrong. The modern name for what happens to you in a crowd is deindividuation. It means, simply, the loss of your individual identity. Not permanently, not completely, but enough that your normal internal brakes weaken. Why would evolution build a brain with brakes that weaken so easily? Think about your ancestors, thousands of generations back. Survival meant being part of a group. A lone human on the savannah was a meal waiting to happen. A human inside a group was protected, fed, and warned of danger before it arrived. Your brain evolved to prioritize group cohesion over individual judgment because for most of human history, the group's decision mattered more than your personal opinion of it. If everyone ran, you ran. If everyone froze, you froze. Hesitating to question the group could get you killed by the very thing the group was already fleeing. That old wiring didn't disappear. It's still sitting underneath your modern skull, waiting for the right conditions. So what actually causes it to switch on? Psychologist Philip Zimbardo, the same researcher behind the infamous Stanford prison experiment, spent years studying this exact question. He found that de-individuation depends on a few key ingredients: anonymity, group size, and reduced accountability. Strip away someone's name. Blend them into identical clothing or a crowd of similar faces. Remove the sense that anyone is watching them specifically, and their behavior starts to shift, sometimes within minutes. Zimbardo ran an experiment where women were asked to deliver electric shocks to another participant. Some wore hoods that hid their faces, others wore name tags. The hooded, anonymous group delivered shocks nearly twice as long as the identified group. Nothing else changed. Not their personality, not their morals, just their visibility. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Another researcher, Ed Diener, tested this same principle in a much stranger setting: Halloween night. In 1976, Diener's team set up a bowl of candy in dozens of homes with a simple instruction taped nearby: take only one piece. When children arrived alone and were asked their names first, almost none of them took extra candy. But when children arrived in groups and their names were never asked, the rate of stealing more than tripled. Anonymity plus group membership. That combination, again and again, loosens the same internal restraint. Does this mean people in crowds are simply bad, waiting for permission to misbehave? Not exactly. De-individuation doesn't just release cruelty. It releases whatever the group's norms already are. In a violent mob, it amplifies violence. In a stadium full of fans, it amplifies joy. In a religious gathering, it can amplify awe and unity so intense that people describe crying without knowing why. The mechanism is neutral. It's an amplifier, not a villain. What gets amplified depends entirely on what the crowd around you is already doing. This is why a protest can turn peaceful chanting into a full sprint of destruction within seconds. Once one person crosses a line and anonymity does the rest. It's also why worship, concerts, and team sports can produce some of the most transcendent feelings humans ever report. Neuroscience has since caught up to explain what's actually happening inside your skull during these moments. Brain imaging studies on group behavior show that activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, the region tied to self-reflection and personal identity. Brain imaging studies on group behavior show that activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, the region tied to self-reflection and personal identity, quiets down in crowd settings. This is the part of your brain that normally asks, "Wait, is this really me?" When that region goes quiet, the question stops being asked. Not because you've become a different person, but because the part of you that checks in with yourself has temporarily stepped back. Meanwhile, mirror neuron activity, the circuitry responsible for mimicking others' actions and emotions, ramps up. You start to feel what the people around you are feeling, almost involuntarily. Their fear becomes your fear. Their excitement becomes your excitement. Their fury can become yours too. Put those two shifts together. Less self-monitoring, more automatic emotional mirroring. That's the recipe for what Le Bon witnessed in the streets of Paris, dressed up in modern neuroscience. So why does none of this feel obvious in the moment? Because your brain isn't designed to notice its own operating mode changing. You don't experience de-individuation as, "My prefrontal cortex is quieter right now." You experience it as simply feeling more free, more connected, louder, bolder. It feels like clarity. It is, in a strange sense, the opposite. This has enormous consequences for the world you actually live in today. Online spaces are, in many ways, the most powerful de-individuation machine ever built. Anonymous usernames, faceless avatars, massive group size, zero real accountability. Every ingredient Zimbardo identified, scaled to a global audience, available at any hour of the day. That's part of why comment sections can turn vicious in ways the same people would never dream of face to face. It's not that the internet reveals people's true, hidden cruelty. It's that the internet recreates the exact anonymous, faceless crowd conditions that have loosened human restraint since long before screens existed. Knowing this doesn't make you immune to it, but it does change what you can do with it. The next time you feel that surge in a crowd, whether it's a stadium, a protest, a group chat, or a comment thread, you can ask yourself a very old question with new understanding behind it. Is this feeling coming from me? Or is this feeling coming from the size of the group I'm currently inside of? You are standing in a stadium, or a comment section, or a crowded street, and for a moment, you don't feel like yourself. You never do. That was never really the you doing the feeling. It was the size of the crowd around you, quietly deciding how loud your voice would become.